So throughout April, me and the other guys on this channel are going to be trying to review stuff that's kind of outside of our wheelhouses, talking about stuff that's not really what we're used to. So instead of talking about movies, I'm going to be doing 3 reviews, and each of them are going to be on something totally different. So first of all, we're going to be starting with a very well-known and beloved web series, that being Rooster Teeth's Red vs. Blue. And because of all the recent shit that's been going on with Rooster Teeth and Warner Brothers, the only way to view the series is through a website and a paywall on YouTube anyway. I know it's on their website. Or you could get these DVDs like I had to. I didn't get all the seasons, no. I got up to, let's see, this is seasons 1 to 5, and then this was season 6, 7, and 8. So I think if anything, I'm going to try and look for seasons 9 and 10. For the most part, I would say Red vs. Blue was a very important milestone for not just Rooster Teeth, but also machinima and web series in general. For those not in the know, Red vs. Blue is a popular fan-made web series for Rooster Teeth, which started off as a very small collection of friends in their teen years. They were posting it on some like indie website that they had at the time. This was back in like 2003, the early days of the internet. A very simple concept where you have 2 different teams of Spartan warriors. You got Team Red and Team Blue, and they're supposed to be trying to capture the other team's flag, but they're just fucking around all day. They're just constantly sitting around, talking, yapping, contemplating the reason for why they're there.
It's all a lie. Red and blue are the same. Don't start that crap again.
You sound like a conspiracy nut when you talk about that stuff. The government put a chip in my brain.
The president can hear my thoughts.
We never landed on the sun.
They put fluoride in my water.
Actually, that one's true.
It is? No wonder I listen to so much pop music.
It's critical to keep a little padding in our stats. That way, if we're far enough ahead, I can stab Griff in the face and still stay in the lead.
You know, I'm standing right here.
Right where I want you, within face-stabbing range.
Wait, do you actually hear a series of whistling noises followed by some random clicks? No, I was just trying to be helpful. Yeah, well, you're failing. All I hear is that voice, telling us to kill all of our friends before they have a chance to kill us.
Wait, you guys don't hear that?
From my own personal experience, I remember me and my friends used to watch the shit out of Red vs. Blue when we were in middle school. We always quoted episodes to each other. I remember specifically like seasons 4 and 5 and like even 6 and 7. There were always funny moments that we would try to quote to one another.
What the fuck happened? Oh, well, as you may remember, you were impregnated by an alien visitor who was on a noble mission to save his entire species from the...
Can I get the short version of this?
Yeah, you got knocked up, you got knocked out.
Oh, right. I need to start working out. Lose this baby weight.
What do we really need Sarge for anyway? All he ever did was yell at us a bunch and tell us we suck. We'll just split up his duties. You yell at me and I'll tell you you suck.
Shut up and get in the hole, Griff!
You suck, Simmons. Oh, man. This new system's already working out great.
For some unknown reason.
Unknown, sir. We're the ones that did it.
You can't prove that.
I think we can.
Prove it to who?
Because we're the ones that did it.
Allegedly.
Not allegedly. You told me to do it, and I did it.
Reportedly. Let's not go accusing people and inviting a lawsuit until we know the facts.
Who's gonna sue us? Us? We're gonna sue ourselves?
I think it's mainly because in our group of friends, you always had someone who was like the diehard Halo fan and like Xbox fan in general. And yeah, for the most part, this is pretty much like one of the biggest bonding experiences we had back in those days. If we weren't talking about the Halo games themselves, we would always try to talk about Red vs. Blue, and we'd always end up quoting episodes because we thought they were so funny.
I am not a thing. My name is Leonard Church, and you will fear my laser face.
Ooh, hell yeah! Dude, you just got fucked up.
Wow, now that was awesome. Yeah, awesome.
Now, full disclosure, unlike the anime reviews that I've done for Blockbusters show, which only consisted of talking about 1, 2, maybe 3 seasons of a series, I had to write a shit ton of notes down for this one because there is like close to 20 seasons in total, so there's going to be a lot of jumping around, and if I don't get to specific episodes, it's mainly because there's just a lot to talk about. In fact, I'm lucky I was able to whittle it down to 2 sides of paper. Before we talk more about the show and the plot and the ongoing storylines and all the seasons, let's talk a little bit about what machinima is. Aside from being an absolutely horrible website that locks content creators into shitty contracts, machinima is basically a type of video where you take footage from within games or take character models from specific games, or just CG renders of characters in general, and you try to make your own little fan animation out of it. Now, aside from Red vs. Blue, I actually have not experienced that much machinima, aside from a lot of like fan-made music videos of popular songs that were, animated along to people messing around with characters in Halo and stuff like that. And also like some Team Fortress 2 stuff here and there, like a lot of the Source filmmaker stuff that also falls under machinima. Aside from those, I was never the world's biggest expert on machinima, but a lot of people seem to consider Red vs. Blue as one of the biggest examples of helping mainstream machinima and help bring it to a wider audience. As for the plot of the series itself, the first 5 seasons, which a lot of fans dub the Blood Gulch era, it mostly consists of 2 different teams, Team Red and Team Blue, just trying to steal each other's flag, all the while getting incredibly distracted by just simple conversations with each other, because a lot of the people within these groups are either too dumb or too egotistical to get anything done. Team Red consisting of Sarge, Simmons, Griff, Donut, and then later on in the seasons you got Lopez, who is supposed to be a robot. While on Team Blue you got Church, Tucker, Caboose. Later on they introduce Tex, and then they also introduce Griff's sister from the Red team, who has actually come to work for the Blue team. Good way to describe the first 5 seasons, it's kind of like a Halo version of Seinfeld. It's just a lot of people standing around BSing and contemplating why they're on that rock and why they're in the middle of nowhere, just trying to steal the other team's flag. And most of the time contemplating why shit never gets done, not realizing that it's because of their own faults. And the thing that makes the series so entertaining is not just the chemistry between the characters, but also because the lines are just insanely quotable. I mean, there's a reason that me and my friends always looked back on episodes from this series and tried quoting it to one another when we could in our off time. Because even looking back at all these seasons, while season 1 through 5 can be a little bit clunky and it could definitely take a while to get used to, there's a lot of really funny dialogue-heavy scenes between these characters. As the Blood Gulch era was coming to an end, they started introducing new characters, namely Wyoming and the previously mentioned Tex. And they started to flesh these characters out more with a little mini-series they had at the time called Out of Mind. And basically, Out of Mind served as sort of a prequel to Blood Gulch, and it kind of sets up why a lot of the stuff is happening to these characters, as well as establishing these new ones, and it's really good. Whereas the first 5 seasons mostly consisted of just little misadventures of people standing around bullshitting with each other, Seasons 6, 7, and 8, also known as the Recollection era, is where they really started to focus a lot more on story. And another thing to point out about the Recollection era is that they finally jumped from making the series in Halo 1 to Halo 2 and 3, which, because of the success of Red vs. Blue, actually had built-in machinima tools so people could make their own fan-made Halo machinimas within the game. So instead of having to just rely on gameplay footage, which they eventually cleaned up for releases like this, you actually have just straight-up machinima footage made within the games of Halo 2 and 3. I just gotta say, rewatching Season 6 specifically, like just Recollection era in general, but Season 6, it is so funny when they jump between Halo 2 and Halo 3, because the difference in graphics is so blatant.
Do you still have your old suit of armor?
Of course. Wait, why?
Another thing about the Recollection era is that we've now established a new character to follow, that being Washington, who's a soldier, who's specifically a freelancer, who's come to try and get information about this thing called Project Freelancer, which is basically going to serve as the big bad of this entire seasonal arc. To explain it in a little bit of greater detail, you got all these AIs that are typically used to help the Spartan warriors in the Halo games. But this Project Freelancer thing, there's someone controlling it with the director, and the meta is this thing that's hacking into the AI and like corrupting them and turning them bad and making them turn against the soldiers they're supposed to be helping. He needs to try and get information from the Reds and the Blues, and of course they're their typical goofball selves, and while they are somewhat effective soldiers, they're still the lovable dumbasses we've been following for the first 5 seasons. They do become more competent as the series goes on, but let's not get confused. These guys are absolute failures as soldiers. And at one point, Washington even points out that the reason that they've been spending all that time in Blood Gulch is because they're not respected. They were basically sent there for a testing ground purpose.
You still don't get it, do you? You think you're real soldiers? You're not. You guys are nothing.
Whatever. Your face is nothing.
We use your outpost as testing grounds. Practice. You never noticed that you didn't have anything to do unless a freelancer showed up? Or you made a call to command?
You're making that up.
Rewatching the Recollection era, I really liked Washington's character development. Eventually, later on in the series, you do get to see some flashbacks, and they do expand upon, when he first started, he was, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and was ready to fight the fight, but then eventually he became a cold-hardened man of the machine, and he's seen a bunch of shit. But I really liked his introduction in Season 6 and the rest of this era in particular, because they did a good job having him be the straight man, whereas everybody else plays the comic relief and is just fucking up. And he's basically the serious voice of reason who always gets fed up with the dumb shit that the Reds and Blues get into.
Toss that grenade!
That was the worst throw ever. Of all time.
Not my fault. Someone put a wall in my way.
So at this point in the series, to sum up, the first 5 seasons have established some pretty good comedy between all these different exaggerated personalities and characters, and by the beginning of seasons 6, 7, and 8, we now start to establish a lot more heavy emphasis on story. But another great thing that's going to continue into the rest of the series is some awesome action, and believe me, season 8 has some fucking awesome action scenes. I had to do a little bit of digging to find out why the animation looked so good, and it turns out that a lot of the action scenes themselves were actually animated specifically. It wasn't just machinima, which was made within the realms of the games themselves. They actually animated this stuff. The animator in charge of a lot of these fight scenes was a longtime Rooster Teeth contributor, Monty Ohm. First time watching it, I actually didn't know it was animated because it really did look exactly like the game footage. So it was pretty cool to find out that a lot of that was animated. And it's so seamless. It really fits the style of the show. And even when the series continues and the animation starts to improve a little bit more, it really does feel like it blends into the series perfectly. Continuing into seasons 9 and 10, I really like how they start to flesh out more of the relationships, specifically with Washington and the Red and Blue teams, because it feels like the more he's been around them and the more they all work for a common goal to try and stop this Project Freelancer thing, it feels like he actually is befriending them. And while they do get on his nerves, it feels like they're all starting to come together and have some kind of common ground. And it's not only good to see Washington slowly start to bond with them, but it's also good to see the Red and Blue teams finally start compromising and working together to fight a common goal and actually start doing some pretty cool shit together. And just as Washington is starting to get closer to the Reds and Blues, they introduce another new character who's also a freelancer. Her name is Carolina, and she pretty much takes over Washington's role. Like Washington is now starting to become well situated with the Red and Blue teams. Once Carolina joins in, she pretty much takes over as the straight man, and she's now the one that's getting annoyed by the Reds and Blues antics. And ultimately, this whole Project Freelancer storyline comes to an end with seasons 9 and 10. And once they finally defeat it, it seems that Church and Carolina disappear from the rest of the group. And we're not really sure why at this point. They leave it kind of ambiguous and vague. Some people speculate maybe they abandoned them, maybe they were killed. Like, we don't know at this point. They eventually come back later, and I'll get to that when we get to it. But at this point, this whole arc ends with Project Freelancer is defeated, and those two have gone away. And it's actually pretty fitting because Carolina is incredibly competent at what she does. She's a very effective soldier, and it's, again, just like with Washington, it's good to see her bond with these characters. And I like the bond that she has with Church, because Church, out of all the Blue members, he's probably the most effective one, and you can see why he was the leader for the longest time. In comparison, Sarge is a good leader. He fits the typical, howdy, soldier, even though he's a goofball like the rest of them. But compared to Sarge, I actually think that Church is a little bit more of a leader because he actually has his head on straight and he doesn't get into petty squabbles with Griff like Sarge does.
Always been lazy, insubordinate, and I suspect that underneath that helmet, You're probably extremely ugly to boot.
No argument here.
Over the years, I've been so disappointed in your work, I've slowly stopped giving you things to do. Most days, I forget you even exist.
Yeah, it's been a good run.
Not sleeping. I was drugged.
Sorry, Sarge. He's not sleeping. He's doing drugs.
Shut up, Donut. I'm not doing drugs. We were attacked. Oh, they must have used some kind of tranquilizer on me and... Griff? Hey, where's Griff?
Maybe he's out scoring you junkies some more drugs.
They must have taken him.
Who would take Griff? Garbage collectors? Where's Simmons?
Simmons? If you wanted Simmons, why didn't you yell like a lunatic for Simmons?
Damn it, Griff! I entrust you with one duty, and that's to know exactly where Simmons is at all times so I can find him. Simmons watches Donut. Donut watches me.
Yeah, who watches me?
Nobody. You move less than Donut does.
Oh my god, that's like one of the biggest running things in this series. Sarge does not respect Griff whatsoever. And granted, Griff is a fuck-up who's constantly thinking that he's better than everybody is and that he's hot shit. But, yeah, those two have some of my favorite interactions throughout the course of the series. They're really funny together. Carolina and Church disappearing after forming this, like, kind of bond, considering that they're both pretty competent. Like, seeing them disappear, you're like, oh shit, what the hell's gonna happen? I mean, yeah, Project Freelancer's defeated, that's great, but what the hell's gonna happen now? And from what I can tell, when season 10 came to an end, a lot of people thought that was gonna be the end of Red vs. Blue, and for all it's worth, I actually do think that season 10 was a pretty fitting finale. It did leave some stuff ambiguous, and it did kind of leave the door open, but I could see why people would say, oh, it's a pretty good way to end the series. But, me personally, I think the next era of Red vs. Blue was the perfect series finale, which is seasons 11 to 13, also known as the Course era. I think that's mainly because I really like the story and I really like the progression that we get throughout the course of these 3 seasons. They really take their time. The story is incredibly well paced. You still got some great comedy, you got some great action. You have a lot of the charm that we've been building up to with season 6 onward, and it feels like a natural progression from that storyline to the next storyline. And continuing what I said earlier with the animation getting better, at this point in the series, it was jumping over from Halo 3 to now the entire series was being made with Halo 4, which again has built-in machinima tools, so that's pretty cool. So first of all, season 11 I think has a great start, and I think this point in the series you have such a good concept for what's going to carry the next 3 seasons. At this point, the Reds and the Blues are considered intergalactic war heroes because they helped take down Project Freelancer, so even though Carolina and Church are gone, the Reds and the Blues end up on this planet that's in the middle of a civil war. And eventually we find out that it's in the middle of a civil war because of these 2 guys, these 2 mercenaries called Felix and Locus. And at first, we actually think that Felix is a good guy. They establish him as, you know, helping the Reds and the Blues and trying to shut down this whole war, but then it turns out that him and Locus are in cahoots. And it's actually a really well done twist that pays off much later as the story throughout this era progresses. On top of that, you have some really great character detail. The Reds now feel like they don't really have a lot of purpose since they took down Project Freelancer, and now they're in the middle of something that's not even technically their fight. So for all they care, they just try to go back to the good old days and just try to shoot the shit and act like they're not a part of it. All the while, the remaining members of Team Blue now have to adjust to having Washington as the leader now that Church is gone. And I really like them trying to cope with the fact that they have a new leader and the fact that someone they've known for so long, like Church, is now gone for them. And things start to get even worse in the finale of the season because at this point, Sarge, Washington, and Donut are now going with the Republic of Course, meaning now that the remaining Reds and Blues are going to have to help lead these rebel soldiers and try to help stop this huge war before it can escalate any further. Much like Griff on the Red team, I really like the character of Tucker. He's like the self-proclaimed ladies' man of the group, and he's kind of egotistical and egocentric, but one thing I really liked in this season is that they actually have him step up to bat, and he takes over as sort of the next new leader of the group. And he has a moment where he's supposed to be giving a big speech to try and rally the troops and like motivate them into battle. And even though he does have some good points, he still feels like the same old character because he still has some funny lines in between.
I don't want to be your leader. Being a leader totally sucks. It's hard work and you have to put up with people you hate. But I want to get my friends back, and seeing as that's our mission, I will deal with whatever bullshit I have to do to make it happen. And if I was holding a mic, this would be the part where I drop it.
I vote for Tucker.
Yeah, I vote for Tucker.
Me too.
They slowly start to unravel that Locus and Felix are working together. We're actually paid off by some evil overlord fuckers. They're using Locus and Felix to carry out their dirty work for them. And another good thing about the season is, hey, Church and Carolina finally come back, so it seems like they're not going to be in this alone. And then that kicks us into season 13, which, me personally, I wish this was the last season of the show. I really liked how this one came out. Season 13, from beginning to end, is basically the Reds and the Blues trying to get both parties in this planet's civil war together so that they can finally take down the real enemy, which is Locus, Felix, and the bastards that are in charge of them trying to destroy this entire planet and its civilization.
Fight to wipe that stupid grin off of Felix's face! Fight because you deserve to fucking win!
Well, shit. I'll fight for that.
Me personally, I think season 13 was the perfect blend of comedy, action, and really good character detail. There's lots of good stuff. We see a lot of characters come back, you know, characters from like super early on in the series that we haven't seen finally showing up again. There's lots of really funny lines, lots of great action scenes. I even like how in the last episode of the season, you have awesome fight scenes that are incredibly well animated, but they still remember that it's a comedy show and they actually work in comedy into the fight scenes effectively.
Say goodbye to your stupid blue moron. What is wrong with you people? Hands off.
And most of all, I really love the bittersweet ending that this season has. They stopped the bad guys once and for all, which is good, but there's this thing that could potentially kill all of them. And Church has this hologram moment where, you know, things are frozen in time before whatever's going to kill them is going to kill them. And he gives this very emotional speech about how warriors sometimes have to make a sacrifice for the greater good. And then it cuts to black.
We'll never know if the day was really saved. In the end, they just have to have faith. Ain't that a bitch?
What I really like about that, it's a good way of keeping things ambiguous while also feeling like a good way to end the story. It makes it so the fans can have their own conclusion as to where things went. And it seems like they're leaning towards they were able to save the galaxy and they became heroes, but we don't really know what the official outcome was. They leave it ambiguous enough in a way that doesn't feel like a fuck you kind of cliffhanger. And if you want my personal opinion, yeah, I'd like to believe that the Reds and Blues lived to tell the tale. And considering some of the members in each group, you know that they were going to be rubbing it in so many people's fucking faces. Even though I personally think that season 13 should have been the end, I will say this about like these following seasons. Season 14, I actually didn't mind all that much. For the most part, season 14 has episodes that are out of canon. There's a few that are supposed to be in canon, but for the most part, it's supposed to be out of canon. And a lot of them just kind of feel experimental. Like you just have a bunch of wacky little adventures that are done in different styles. You got some stop motion stuff, some 3D animated stuff. You got some 2D animation. You got the characters in chibi designs. You've got the characters interacting with the show's creators and voice actors, which is pretty cool.
The enemy is attacking. You hold this position while I flank him.
Holding position!
That's something you don't see every day.
The different styles were cool. Some of the jokes were funny. I think some were a little better than others. But I think that if they were going to continue in this direction, it would have been like, okay, you know, you wrapped up the story in season 13. You had a really kick-ass way to wrap up the series. And now if you want to continue things with this kind of mini-sode, you know, little mini adventures, little wacky vignettes, if you wanted to continue it like that, I actually would have preferred if they did that. But season 15 then decided to bring things back with a story. To season 15's credit, I actually think that the plot they came up with for this season was not horrible. Season 15, we're following a reporter who's following a group of terrorists who are calling themselves the Reds and the Blues as a way to basically desecrate the name of the Reds and the Blues by making it look like they're going around and doing all these terrible things. And halfway through this season, it's revealed that they're not the real Reds and the Blues. The real Reds and the Blues show up. They lived, after all, okay? And now they're gonna take out these terrorists, and at that point, I just kind of lost interest in this season. The only other thing that really sticks out to me in season 15 is there's a joke about The Last Jedi. granted, I'm totally down with joking about The Last Jedi. Clown on that movie all you want. But, I don't know, seeing them joke about The Last Jedi, it's like, oh, zing. Yeah, take that. I don't know, something about that joke just felt kind of forced. It just kind of felt like, this is a thing everyone's talking about. Gotta put a joke about it in the show. It's weird because most of the jokes in Red vs. Blue never really felt like that. I don't know, maybe this one's just me. I mean, it's a little funny, but it also felt really like, oh, topical joke, you know? It's like when you watch Simpsons or Family Guy or South Park and it's like, oh, it's the thing of the week everyone's talking about. Oh, we're going there. The last thing I want to point out was season 15 onward with the series is now they've jumped over to making the machinimas in Halo 5. You know, everyone's favorite Halo game, right? Before we move on to the other seasons, I really don't have that much to say about them. I gotta be honest. Some of these later seasons, I really stopped paying attention because I was so losing interest with a lot of the storylines that they were coming up with. But I think it's appropriate now that we talk a little bit about some of the behind-the-scenes drama over at Rooster Teeth. Now, I gotta be totally honest. Aside from Red vs. Blue, I was never the world's most avid viewer of Rooster Teeth. They had stuff that I liked, like Achievement Hunter was something that I kept up with. A lot of their Let's Play series I thought were pretty good. Red vs. Blue. I never really got into Ruby all that much, but from what I've heard from a bunch of friends, people have told me that it started off good and then eventually just got milked into oblivion, which honestly I'm willing to believe, considering that that's how I kind of feel about the later seasons of Red vs. Blue, honestly. As far as I can tell, at this point in time when this season came out and some of the later seasons were coming out, Rooster Teeth was becoming what a lot of these other YouTube channels and small content creator websites were becoming. They were starting to become bloated with people. They had way too many people. They started laying off a bunch of people. A lot of people were coming out saying that they burned bridges and that some people weren't getting paid enough. They even started nixing a bunch of the OG content creators from their platform. And you even started seeing a bunch of like classic voice actors and some of the creators of the original series and early seasons of Red vs. Blue were getting the axe. The one that really sticks out to me is they eventually axed the voice actor for Caboose. Aside from the stuff that was coming out about Rooster Teeth shutting down and episodes having to be viewable behind a paywall or on some specific Rooster Teeth owned website, I did notice that Rooster Teeth's views have certainly been dropping. I mean, they have a large number of subscribers, and yet the number of subscribers does not match the number of views that their videos are getting. And even though I haven't kept up with them in a super long time, the only thing I've noticed is that a lot of their newer content is mostly just podcast stuff, aside from like the occasional announcement for like new videos from Red vs. Blue or Ruby or stuff like that. But it really feels like one of those channels that, you know, it was made by a group of friends when they were just teenagers and everybody was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and had so many dreams of what they wanted to do with this web series they were doing. And then the older they get, the more corporatized it becomes, and it just starts to feel so watered down and bland. And of course, this leads us to the recent stuff of Rooster Teeth shutting down after they got bought out by Warner Brothers. And, you know, as much as I'm going to rag on these next few seasons, I gotta say, it does suck. It really does. Even though I haven't kept up with Rooster Teeth in a while, and they really did milk Red vs. Blue into the ground with some of these later seasons, it does suck that they're eventually going to have to just, you know, bite the bullet. Business-wise, I get it. Warner Brothers is a big company, and Rooster Teeth could certainly use the money. So business-wise, I could see why they would make that merger. It sucks, but from the business perspective, I get it. But just because I get it doesn't mean I have to like it. And like a lot of other people, while I think we're all accepting the fate of Rooster Teeth having to go away eventually or, you know, be under the rule of Warner Brothers, does that mean we're going to stop making fun of Warner Brothers and some of the shitty management they have over there? No. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk a little bit about these next few seasons. I really don't have that much to talk about because aside from not really liking them, not really liking the direction of some of these new seasons, there's only one season in particular that I wanted to focus on, but just to breeze through seasons 16 and 17, the few notes that I had consisted of some of the new fight animation I don't think is that good. It feels less Halo and it feels more like something like Cyberpunk, if that makes any sense. The fight scenes don't feel as choreographed, or at least not as well choreographed. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but they really didn't feel like something you'd see in the Halo universe. Even as far as the story goes, it's just weird. Like, it's really fucking weird. You introduce all this time travel shit. People are trying to go back in time so that way they're in charge of everything, and there are these cosmic gods that are in control of everything, and you know, if you go back in time and alter history, you can become a cosmic god, and it just felt so un-Red versus Blue. I don't know how many people felt this way, but when I was watching episodes of these seasons before I inevitably just shut them off, I was like, man, how the fuck did we get here? A bunch of goofballs on a like mostly deserted planet trying to steal the other team's flag and just fucking off all day, to cosmic gods and trying to alter history so you could be the one in charge of everything. I don't know, man. It just felt so bizarre. But now let's talk about one of the things that people love to complain about with the new Red vs. Blue, that being Season 18, Red vs. Blue 0. Oh, I already can't stand it from the opening theme song, so that's a good start. Now, if you were to tell me that Season 18 was meant to be a parody of all the recent, like, reboots and soft reboots and sequel reboots to popular franchises where you have a new generation of heroes and then you get cameos from some of the old beloved characters, but there are a bunch of old farts now, and you know, there's a bunch of like quippy zinger dialogue that's like trying to copy the Joss Whedon Avengers style of writing. If you were to tell me that this was a parody of that, I'd probably believe you, because it really does feel like a parody of one of those, but I don't think it was meant to be a parody. It feels like that's just how it was written. That's pretty much what the plot of the season is. You're following a bunch of new characters who are these new young soldiers who are recruited, and they all have to learn to work together. Everyone has a different zingy personality. You've got two people who are already close with each other. You got this one girl who's kind of new and like she's like all wide-eyed and ready to get into the fight. Then you got the funny guy. You got this one girl who's moody and like pouty, and then eventually you find out that she has some kind of tragic backstory, and that's the reason she's so distant and cold from everybody else. And then eventually she starts to melt and warm up and take charge. And I gotta be honest, just like these other seasons, I started tuning out so fast because it just was not capturing my interest. To be honest, the last few seasons of this series kind of lost a lot of the luster of the originals. I mean, the first few seasons definitely had the comedy. They were rough around the edges in terms of the visuals, but it had the comedy to back it up. And then as the series continued, you had great character development and great character detail, and you know, continuing the great character interactions from the first 5 seasons. And then you had awesome action scenes, and maybe it's just me, but just like seasons 16 and 17, I didn't think the fight scenes were all that cool in this season. I mean, it's well animated, and oh, that's another thing. This season isn't even a machinima. It's all just straight up animated. Like, it honestly feels less like Red vs. Blue, and it feels like if, like, Disney XD or like some like channel that's marketed for children made a Halo TV show. That's kind of what it feels like. It feels like they're trying to like make a Halo show and have characters in the Halo universe, but you have them talk like, you know, well man, gotta talk like this. Is this team building, bro? Like stuff like that. It's like,
So, did this count as team building? Or did we want to still try that escape room?
What if we just watched a movie instead? No. No one talks at the movies. That's the worst idea for team building.
It's not even Halo fan fiction. It's not even Red vs. Blue fan fiction. It just feels like out of touch executives made it. Oh man. To wrap up the overall summary, apparently the last season of Red vs. Blue is coming out in a couple of weeks. I think that's dropping sometime in May. I forget what it said, but I remember reading that it's ending on a movie, or that they're gonna air the entire season as just one full-length movie. So who knows, maybe the last season will be good. I hear that they're bringing back some old people who worked on it. I don't know exactly who they're gonna get, but who knows, maybe it'll be something. Maybe I'm not entirely sold on it because I read it was also continuing Red vs. Blue 0, so... Man, Red vs. Blue has definitely lost some of its luster, and you know, people can chalk up because, oh, Rooster Teeth have become more corporatized, or because they started burning bridges with some of their OG creators, or, oh, the recent Warner merger, maybe people have just stopped caring, and maybe they've just been making it to try and hold on to the Red vs. Blue IP, whatever. Me personally, Red vs. Blue, I'd recommend the first 13 seasons of. I'd say the first 5 seasons, while not perfect, definitely have a lot of funny moments in them to justify watching them. And then that point forward, there's a perfect juggle of comedy, action, and really good character drama. But, you know, season 14 had some creative stuff in it. Season 15 had an okay start, but halfway through I just lost interest. And after that, I really don't have much to say about seasons 16, 17, and I certainly am not a fan of season 18. I wasn't able to finish it, but from what I was able to watch of it, I'm like, ugh. This, I hate to be a crotchety old man here, but I was just like, man, this ain't the Red vs. Blue I grew up with. I think Red vs. Blue is a very fine web series that over time started to lose a lot of its charm, but I don't think that takes away from a lot of the best that it had. It had a lot of great humor, a lot of great fight scenes, a lot of great action, really good animation, but now it just kind of feels like, well, I can see why they're ending it. It's gone on long enough, so if anything, at least they're ending it soon. I guess there is this. There is one bright side here. It's still probably better than the Halo series on Paramount Plus. I guess there's that. Yeah, I think that sums up my thoughts on Red vs. Blue. So, next time we're going to be doing a video game review. We're going to be talking about an old Sega Genesis game, and this is a Justice League game. So, I'm not going to spoil too much about that. You have to wait for the review to see what it is, but until then, guys, I'm Am Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Hold on, what's a fancy word for choosing between two things you don't want to do?
Conundrum? Dilemma. A threesome with cheerleaders?
I'm gonna go with conundrum.